Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Krona. This is part of the Wolters Kluwer organisation, and they publish annually a book on health and safety which we've reviewed before. This book is the Law of Health and Safety at Work 2015 to 16, now in its 24th edition, and it's been written by Rachel Moore. Again, I hasten to add, and Rachel's done a sterling job producing this excellent work. We've given it a review title. It's a paperback, this work, and our review title for this year is A Comprehensive Book on Health and Safety, preeminent in its summary of the complexities of the current legislation. Let's have a look at the book first. Here it is. It's a small paperback. There it is. That's the front cover, and then you've got the spine and then the back. Now the book, the original text was by Norman Selwyn, and I'll mention him because it's important to remember this book's been around for some considerable time. The first publication was 1982, you can see there. So, and then there's a foreword, which is well worth reading, to give you an up-to-date picture of where we go, because it's more than 40 years, of course, since the original legislation came in, and Teresa Budworth has written the foreword. Then you have a preface, which is just to set the scene from Rachel. Then you've got the various chapter headings. You should find most of what you need in this book. The chapter headings are quite detailed, so you've got a lot of information there, just covering just about every aspect of what questions you might have. There are 14 chapters in total. Then you have a series of appendices at the back with useful addresses and so forth, directives. Then there's a glossary and an index. There's the table of statutes, which is quite important because obviously the legislation is linked in to a lot of other series of statutory provisions. Then you've got that information there. From there we get on to regulations and orders. Again, very important in anything to do with health and safety, as I'm sure those involved will know. A lot of information. Then we get to the case law, which has been updated. Very helpful. A lot of cases there, and a lot of newer cases too, which is I'm glad to see. Then you start off with the background, chapter 1. And the book runs all the way through. There are no footnotes, but what you do have is you have the actual paragraph numbering, which you can probably see just there at the side, and then if you go through, that becomes a bit more apparent, the actual paragraph numbering, to find things. Now at the back of the book, the actual index is based on the paragraph numbering, so that's how you find what you're looking for quite quickly. And it's quite useful to say that because sometimes people will think it's by page numbering. It isn't, it's paragraph numbering. There is a useful glossary which I've again found helpful because there are words used which I sometimes don't really understand what they mean until I've got something here which assists me. Because this book is in my view, and obviously the subject index is clearly set out, but this book is designed for everybody to read. It's not just a book for a professional or a human resources person or whatever person you want to call. I think it's valuable for trade union people, officials and interested parties. I think it's valuable for anybody who has an interest in this area. And of course, if you are tasked with doing health and safety checks or have responsibility for it, this is the book I think you should have in your local library, your business, because it's the sort of book which you can go to very quickly, and it's not an expensive book either. This is what we say about it anyway. Edited once more by Rachel Moore and published by Wolters Kluwer for Krona. The book, as Moore explains, continues the tradition of providing a comprehensive but straightforward guide to the understanding of the law of health and safety. And by way of expert commentary and close yet succinct analysis, this highly regarded annual publication deals with the general law on health and safety, referring throughout to related areas such as employment and discrimination and other factors that can affect the practical management of workplace safety, which in essence is an important aspect of risk management. Now, that's from the manager's point of view, and as I've said before, I think it's got a much wider application, because there is a lot of confusion. I've taught this subject to students and I'm aware of the problems. There's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of preconceived notions about health and safety. So I think this book does set the theme right, and as I've indicated, it has a wide application for a readership. So it's a big readership we're looking at with this book, not something that's very, very narrow. Risk management then, which is I think an important factor for any smaller business certainly, and obviously bigger businesses will have insurance policies and everything else, but it's a very acute issue. It's frequently referred to throughout the book, and rightly too. And to cite just one example, the section on employees working at height stresses proper planning in the provision and use of proper equipment. Common sense, you would think, but if people are working at the top of a building, you've got to have proper precautions in. It's pointed out that foresight of the risk can, more often than not, reduce or eliminate the risk totally. And that actually, I think, was the purpose in 1974 when the legislation came in. That was the idea behind it, and a welcome piece of legislation in my view, whatever people say. You've got to have some statutory basis upon which you do business, and you've got to protect the workforce and everybody else for that matter. So it's just, to my mind, it's not about any form of party political dogma. It's about one issue, and that is some common sense about how we do our business in its simplest form. Let's take another example. Again, this is a classic for any lawyer involved in PI slips and trips. It's stressed that forethought and foresight is essential to proper and thorough risk assessment, and that a culture of awareness needs to be fostered. Safety is the responsibility of everyone. Hear, hear. That's exactly right, and that's the way it should be looked at in our view. However, in line with the Health and Safety Executive Guidelines, health and safety involves managing risks properly rather than being risk averse, in that daily life is full of risk. Of course it is. What is important is that a sensible balance must be struck between the fanatical avoidance of risk, like banning Christmas decorations, for example, and the proper management of it. You do get ridiculous comments from time to time in the media, which we're familiar with. And as I've said before, it is the common sense approach, which is the one that must, in our view, we would submit, prevail. The guide, therefore, has been written with just such a balanced aim in view, and Rachel succeeds with her task admirably. Writing in the foreword, Teresa Budworth, who is the Chief Executive of the National Examination Board in Occupational Safety and Health, calls the work one of the few books in this field which is immediately understandable to those new to the subject and is very readable. Yes. She also points out that businesses and organisations that manage health and safety well are likely to be more efficient and financially healthier. I'm sure that's right. If any board members think of that, that must be a prerequisite, surely. She goes on to comment on the insights the book provides on civil liability, including employers and occupiers' liability, illustrated by useful case law throughout. The case law will be of use because it is obviously for lawyers, that side of it, but this does have a wider applicability in an era where we have many more litigants in person. And a quick look at the contents of the book indicates the broad range of health and safety topics and areas which are clearly explained, including the relevant legislation, the management of health and safety, and compensation for injuries at work. There are specific chapters on substances and on construction work, as well as a chapter on particular and familiar health and safety issues, from employment of women and maternity rights to alcohol at work, agency and home workers, workplace stress, bullying, sexual harassment, and of course much, much more. And that includes the telephone ringing. Lawyers especially will value the wealth of references in the table of statutes, of cases and of regulations and orders and so on. Very important, as I've indicated earlier, in this area. Lists of all relevant UK and EU legislation are provided, and there's a useful glossary and appendices and an index of over 40 pages. I think it's useful for anyone preparing for professional examinations in this subject. The book should be considered an essential annual purchase for anyone professionally involved in this complex area. So thank you very much to all concerned. The authors endeavoured to state the law as at September 2015, and I'm actually reviewing this book in the September, so it's useful. There's the actual paperback, spine, and then the back of it there. Just a quick look. Here are the paragraph numbers, you can see there. There's a lot of detail, and that's what you want. Right at the back, of course, as I've indicated, you do have useful, a very, very useful, very detailed index. So you should be able to find everything that you're looking for. Then you do, in fact, as I say, the glossary is important. You've also got useful addresses, because there's a lot of information which is available. I think it's a very good book indeed. I'm very glad that they're continuing to publish these works. So thank you to Krona, thank you to Rachel, and thank you to everybody concerned for their contribution and input. It's a very important book. Do have a good look at it. Bye-bye.